Time for some death from the skies. Today we're putting the Primaris Inceptors through their paces. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're reviewing the Primaris Inceptors, another really quite fun, effective and dynamic unit for the Space Marines in 40k, and one that I think is really quite usable competitively in the new edition. In the video we're going to take a look over their datasheet, a bit of a discussion of their plasma weapons and their overcharging, and any obvious ways that we can make them stronger in game. Model wise they're sadly a bit harder to come by than they were in 8th edition, seeing as they're no longer discounted as they were in Dark Imperium and No Fear. They'll currently cost you £30 from Games Workshop or £25.50 from Element Games, which if you're living in the UK and you're thinking about picking some up, then there's a link to them in the video description below. It does help to support the channel. In the background, Inceptors are jump pack equipped Gravis armoured Primaris Marines, and are a fast moving close support squad in the Space Marine arsenal. Inceptors are typically found at the tip of the spear, descending from the skies or hurtling up the battlefield, blazing away with assault bolters or plasma exterminators, ideal as shock assault troops, combining heavy firepower, rapid movement, and the thick armour of Gravis plate. A well-coordinated assault from Inceptors can leave an entire enemy formation reeling, and thoroughly unprepared for the main Space Marine assault. So let's see what these shock troops can do on the table then. So Inceptors are of course a fast attack choice for Codex Space Marines, and they cost 40 points if they're armed with assault bolters, or 50 if they're armed with plasma exterminators. They essentially have the profile of flying Gravis armoured Marines, movement 10 inches and fly, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength 4, toughness 5, 3 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 7 and a 3+ save. The Sergeant gets an extra pip of leadership and attacks as you'd expect, and in terms of keywords they have the Gravis keyword, jump pack, core and infantry. Keywords wise you couldn't really ask for all that much more. Being core is really useful to access all sorts of buffs from characters, jump pack and fly are great for manoeuvrability, and infantry mean that they'll be able to benefit from terrain very nicely. They're pretty much the definition of an easy unit to use. Weapons wise they have the choice of either those assault bolters or plasma exterminators. The assault bolters will give each Inceptor 6 shots at 18-inch range, strength 5, AP -1 and damage 1. A good general all-round profile, pretty decent against hordes, gets a bit nastier against other things if you're in the tactical doctrine. Plasma exterminators have really come to the fore in this new edition though, with their reduced points cost. These are 18-inch range blast weapons with D3 shots each, strength 7, AP -3 and damage 1, and if you overcharge them then they're strength 8 and damage 2. The fact that they're 2 individual D3 shot blast weapons is really useful. It means that if you're targeting any unit that's 6 or more strong, then you're going to get flat 3 shots at them, so you're essentially just flat stronger than the assault bolters against them. Even against hordes, going up to strength 7 and AP -3 is really good. You'll be wounding guardsmen on 2s, or cutting through anything that has a 4+ armor save with no save at all. Special rules wise, they have Angels of Death for those combat doctrines, and also Shock Assault should they want to be charging in. They can combat squad, but typically I would choose not to. I just run multiple small units, that way you get more sergeants if nothing else. They have Death from Above, their standard deep strike rules, which is typically the way that I'd usually want to run them, jumping down from the skies. But in the transition to 9th edition they did lose a bit. They lost their impact hit special rules. You used to have a chance of getting mortal wounds on the charge. It wasn't very big though, so it wasn't really the biggest deal. Probably the biggest nerf going into 9th edition though is losing the ability to fall back and shoot as per the fly keyword. As you need to get quite close, this is a bit of a weakness. Unless you're one of certain chapters, you can't just happily jump back and blaze away with the assault bolters all over again. Overall though, I think they're pretty decent all-round units. Their damage output is fairly reasonable for the points. They're decently fast and manoeuvrable, and at least reasonably durable, though a bit less so than some of the other Primaris Space Marine equivalents. In terms of the damage output of their weapons, the assault bolters are generally pretty all-purpose weapons. 120 points of assault bolter Inceptors will average you around about 8 dead orcs, 2 dead space marines, or 2 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, and they do get a fair bit better in tactical doctrine. They will basically stack wounds on anything, but are only really all that efficient against anything with 1 wound and a low armor save. The plasma Inceptors are really quite interesting though. Provided they're not making use of their blast special rule, you'll average 5 dead orcs, 2 dead space marines, or 3.3 wounds to a vehicle, which to me just kind of goes to show that if you are taking plasma Inceptors, you're generally going to want to be overcharging them, otherwise you might as well have taken assault bolters instead. If you do press the overcharge button, then you're killing 7 dead orcs on average, a whopping 5 or 6 dead space marines, or 9 wounds to a vehicle. They're pretty much like Bleach, drop them in and they'll kill pretty much whatever they shoot at. Even if you can't get in on any heavy targets, the blast rule will still make them decently usable against hordes. Every single guy will be getting 6 shots whenever they target a unit of 6+, so they'll still rinse through infantry pretty quickly, and perhaps their ideal target is big units of elite infantry, things like Terminators or Space Marines that have greater than 6 models in the unit. Now, overcharging is kind of uniquely dangerous to these guys, in the way that it isn't for normal plasma weapons. You get so many more plasma shots per guy that when you overcharge you have a far higher chance of blowing them up. On top of that, they're far more expensive models than most plasma bearers, so each time you do lose one, it's a much bigger kick in the teeth. Firstly, when you do choose to overcharge plasma Inceptors, you should always roll for each plasma Inceptor separately. If you just roll for the whole unit, then you'll just lose as many Inceptors as you reroll ones, and you've actually got a fairly big chance of just wiping out your entire unit in one shooting phase. You really need to roll them separately. You might get one guy who just fries himself with 4 ones on one round of shooting, and one guy who just completely survives, and it's a really meaningful difference as to whether or not you roll them right. Even with rolling for each Inceptor separately though, you have a really high chance of killing them if you don't have a source of reroll ones. If you've got no rerolls at all, then even rolling for each one separately, you have a 50% chance of losing the model. Out of a squad of 4, you lose 2. You'll still have that turn's damage output, but you have essentially just killed 100 points of your own models. So they had better do something pretty spectacular if that is going to be the case. In general, if I were taking Plasma Inceptors, I typically want to have a source of reroll ones somewhere, either deep striking alongside them, or where they can jump down into that aura. The chance still isn't 0 though, even if you are rerolling all ones for the squad. You still have around about a 1 in 9 chance of losing each Inceptor, so out of a squad of 5 you might lose 1 every second shooting phase. Still though, much better, and it's one of the units that you can really justify including a character to support them. You get both the damage output increase, and also the increased chance of not blowing up your own expensive models. Plasma Inceptors really can be incredibly potent though when they're firing against an ideal target. Say you had 5 of them with a reroll ones character in support, and they managed to target an intercessor squad with 10 models in it, so they get their blast rule off. That's a crazy 30 overcharged plasma shots coming out of them, all at reroll ones, and your average damage output is something like 16 dead intercessors, so you should quite easily wipe the squad and then some, though you will still have around about a 50% chance to lose 1 Inceptor. Not bad at all in a Space Marine heavy meta. So let's talk a bit about how we can get some more out of them on the table then. Certain chapters can be really useful for them. Imperial and Crimson Fists are great with Assault Bolters. A flat 25% increase in damage output is no bad thing at all, and they both can get a bit more whether they're firing against hordes or Imperial Fists ignoring cover. I think Ultramarines are really quite a good pairing with Inceptors. They can fall back and shoot, covering one of their main weaknesses, and they've got a pretty handy stratagem in Sons of Guilliman. You can spend 1 command point to reroll hit rolls of 1 for the unit. That means that you can happily run the Plasma Inceptor squad without having to pay for a captain should you not want to. They can be very independent and very killy. I've also seen people use the Seal of Oath dropped alongside the Plasma Inceptors to give them full rerolls against one favoured target, again pretty much guaranteeing they're going to delete something out of existence. Ultramarines seem to be a very strong pick indeed. White Scars can advance and shoot those assault weapons for no penalty. Iron Hands will get you a bit of extra durability, and I quite like their stratagem for exploding 6s to wound, very nice when you're focusing down one target. Raven Guard can get you -1 to hit or bonus saves, and a fall back and shoot stratagem, and Deathwatch can give you some reroll 1s to wound, and also have a stratagem for falling back and shooting with jump packs. Dark Angels are looking on in envy at those Plasma Inceptors at the moment, as unfortunately their Weapons of the Dark Age stratagem was removed in the previous Codex update. Fingers crossed that one returns with their Codex. It's certainly one that made their plasma go to the next level. Finally, for successor chapters, Bolter Fusiliers can be a decent pick with the Assault Bolters. Again, can help up their damage output while still allowing them to be fully independent. In terms of character support, we've already talked about why captains are so great for rerolling 1s. It's almost mandatory if you want to overcharge your plasma weapons, which in general you are going to want to. Other rerolling type characters will be good, including lieutenants. You could think about dropping them into the aura of an ancient for some shots when you die, and you do have the potential for apothecaries to heal them, though I think that things might just be a bit limited, because most of those characters are walking, and they might struggle to keep up with your fast-moving Inceptor squad. Something like a jump pack or Terminator captain deep striking alongside them though seems like a very strong pick to me. Stratagems wise, they actually have quite a few useful ones. Probably my favourite out of them is Transhuman Physiology. 1 command point for a unit of 5 Inceptors to be only wounded on 4+ is really going to blunt the heavy firepower that your opponent's likely to want to put into them. If you're about to be focused by tons of damage 1 weapons though, then the Gravis Armor stratagem Unyielding in the face of the foe can be good. It can give them +1 save and could be even more potent if you're already in light cover anyway. If they do decide to charge in, then Hammer of Wrath can be a decent value one for mortal wounds, and might actually make the difference as to whether or not you can afford to charge a target. If you're charging into a bunch of toughness 3 things with decent saves, then it could be excellent value. Mortal wounds on a 3+ is very nice. A bit more niche, you could use Uncompromising Fire, which allows you to both shoot and perform an action, and it's actually really quite a strong one for Inceptors. You could have a squad of these jump down into the opponent's backfield, deploy scramblers for a mission objective, and still get to fire their guns, which honestly, if it's the difference between you making that objective or not making it, then it's likely going to be worth 2 CP. Finally, if the opponent does think about countering your deep strike with their deep strike, then Auspex scanning them straight back off the table with a bunch of plasma weapons seems like a nice move to me. So how would I think about using Inceptors in game then? First of all, I'd pretty much exclusively field them in squads of 3 to 5, I wouldn't go up to 6, you just make yourself more vulnerable to blast weapons, have coherency issues, and will increase the price of transhuman physiology from 1 command point to 2. I think there's advantages to both maximum and minimum size squads, though I'd think about going a bit bigger if I was thinking about buying characters to escort them in. 5 Inceptors with plasma and a captain to jump alongside them sounds like a good formation to me. They can be pretty hard hitting just if there's 3 of them with plasma though, and I've had good success with a unit of 3 with assault bolters myself. They're just really quite a general purpose unit that's not massively at the top of the opponent's target priority list, and can be a good one for jumping onto objectives to help secure them, securing line breaker, and purging enemy Xenos and heretics off their own home field objectives. In general, I'd be wanting to start them in Deep Strike Reserve to have them deploy on the table where they're most needed, though if you are playing an army with massive amounts of board control, some really big hordes, I'd typically start them on the board. Against some lists you're just going to want that assault bolter fire or plasma weapons straight from turn 1, particularly if you are facing like a horde of orcs or tyranids or something like that. If they're starting on the board, I'd start them in cover, ideally out of line of sight, and somewhere that they're going to be able to jump forward and deploy their firepower turn 1. If you are dropping down though in the more traditional way, trying to get them into light cover is a really good idea. Having a 2+ armor save is going to make your opponent spend more firepower to remove them, which is never a bad thing. Generally, Inceptors are going to be a pretty high priority target once they come in. You can think about dropping them far away to keep them safer. 18-inch range is pretty decent out of Deep Strike, and it can be pretty handy from keeping safe from reprisal stratagems such as Auspex scan. However, I think in some matchups it might make more sense to just drop in, do the damage output, and then attempt to charge. It might mean that your Inceptors aren't firing next turn, but equally it might mean that some opponent's units aren't firing as well. So if you could lock up, say, a big strong shooter unit of infantry, then going for the charge might well be the best option. Once they're on the board, they're really quite a good utility unit. They can go for objectives with a decent movement, think about performing actions, and jump into relevant places to either get line breaker points or table quarter points. Having a fairly fast, durable unit that can show up in the late game for these will genuinely make it easier to score more victory points. Overall, at the moment, I would say that Inceptors are a very competitive choice from Codex Space Marines. I think that both options are very viable, though I suspect that we will see more people using the plasma variants than we did before. I would bear in mind the alternatives that you could take compared with taking a squad of Inceptors though. As always, whenever we're talking about deleting heavy things, Eradicators are going to come up in the conversation. They are more durable point for point than Plasma Inceptors and don't kill themselves, and you can put them to outflank in Strategic Reserve for just 1 command point. They're not quite as fast once they've come in though, and they are a lot more limited as to where they're going to be able to turn up, and they're not quite as strong against heavy infantry. I think it could well be worth just taking 1 or 2 units of the outflanking Eradicators and then using Inceptors for other deep strike threats so you have some that can be deployed a bit more freely. Another solid option if you were thinking about assault bolter Inceptors are Terminators. They do put out a decent amount of bolter fire, though a bit less general purpose than the Inceptors due to being lower strength. Again though, they can deploy a very tanky unit right into the midfield, and unlike the Inceptors they're a massive close combat threat as well, which certainly for some chapters where you can get boosted charges out of Deep Strike, that might be a better option. Overall though, I'm very glad to say that Inceptors are looking very strong at the moment, and I'm sure we're going to see them cropping up in competitive lists. So let me know your thoughts on the unit, and particularly any tactics and combos that I might have missed. I do think they're really quite a fun unit for Codex Space Marines. I think most people like things that jump about, have massive damage output, and also a non-zero chance of blowing themselves sky high. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly be keeping the Space Marine unit reviews coming. Finally, if you are enjoying the videos and would like to help support the channel, I'd just like to mention my Element Games affiliate link, which you can find down in the video description. If you live in the UK and were thinking about ordering in some model soldiers at some point in the future, then Element Games is a discount retailer, usually giving 10 to 20% off Games Workshop products. If you click the link in the video description and order something through them, a small amount of the money goes to help support Auspex Tactics without costing any more whatsoever, so it can be a way to support the channel on purchases that you were thinking about making anyway. I do have a very similar Amazon link for people in the USA and Canada. Again, that works in pretty much the same way. Buy anything whatsoever after clicking through to Amazon, and a small amount goes to help support the channel without costing you any more. A massive thank you to you guys who have been using those. It really does help me justify spending quite so much time making YouTube videos about Warhammer Tactics. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.